Hello, everyone. Semi-retired Bob here. I hope you're having a great day. I talk about the carnivore diet, all things related to the carnivore diet, and miscellaneous odds and ends. Today, I have the composition consultant, Jonathan, is here with us. So, Jonathan, why don't you go ahead and say hello and tell my audience just a little bit about who you are?
Sure, thanks, Bob. I appreciate you having me on today. So I'm a 28-year-old man, probably quite young in terms of the average age group in the carnivore demographic. I don't see many 20-year-olds here, basically, but saying that I've had quite a lot of unusual life experience, which has brought me to the carnivore diet. So I started my, first phase of carnivore diet intervention when I was about, maybe 15, 16 years old. So that was, 12, 13 years ago. And I did basically a diet for a bodybuilding competition consisting of eggs and tuna, and that was it. The carnivore diet wasn't really a thing then, so I just thought, okay, well, if I get rid of pretty much all dietary sources of energy, I should be pretty lean. So that's kind of why I did that. I noticed I got quite lean, but not very lean, so it told me that my hormonal profile suffered quite a bit. So I went off that diet, as you do after a bodybuilding competition, went off the rails for a few years. And I revisited the carnivore diet in February 2020, so I believe it's the 2nd of February 2020. And at that time I was working at a vegan health food shop. And I noticed everyone around me, for the most part, most people there were plant-based at least, their health was deteriorating. Many of the shop assistants were suicidal. Many were severely depressed and anxious. And I thought, something isn't right here, I mean, it didn't make sense to me. Why is it I keep seeing the same thing over and over again? And now, a little bit of a backstory about my health issues. So I was diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder at age, I want to say about 21. So in adulthood, basically. I've also had a diagnosis of eczema, asthma, chronic fatigue, which is also known as ME. I've had bad joints. I had a spine fusion 8 months ago. Probably quite a few other things I forgot to mention, but I've had quite a bit in terms of my health issues over the past, decade or two of my life. So what brought me back to carnivore diet again was partly that, like noticing people around me not eating meat and getting worse. But another part was, I thought, well, before although I was eating low fat in a carnivore style diet, the tuna and eggs, I did feel quite good for the most part. I mean, when I initially started it, I noticed my digestion was better. So I looked at all the mechanisms around like autism and stuff relating to that. So what kind of happens with autistic people? There's lots of comorbidities. There's lots of things what issues that people have to deal with on just a day-by-day basis. So things like depression, anxiety, eczema, digestive issues, asthma, they're all linked very closely to autism. Chances are if you have autism, the likelihood is you have at least one of those other things. So I begin to sort of look further and further into it. And I looked at anecdotes online of people that had issues with their spine. So I have spine disease, basically. My actual diagnosis was spondylitic spondylolisthesis, which is grade 1. That occurred in the L5-S1 vertebrae. I had basically no disc left between L5 and S1, and bilateral pars defect, which led to something called foraminal narrowing of the L5-S1 level, which means that my spinal cord, or at least that part of my spine, the nerves, that area of it, was severely impinged. So I was going about my day, in that time I've been playing rugby, American football, bodybuilding, lots of different sports, heavy weightlifting, without knowing I had something which could have killed me at any given point. I didn't have the correct diagnosis, and despite my tears and fear and crying and all that to the doctors and GPs, they didn't recognise that I had something wrong with me. So they didn't do something as basic as an x-ray to identify what was wrong with my spine. Now, people were saying in the community, carnivore diet reduces inflammation. I thought, that's great, less inflammation is a good thing if it's, appropriate and what's required for the human body to repair itself. So I went on it and I was like, okay, it's not working, nothing's getting better. So I changed everything in my life. So I basically revamped everything I was doing at that point to try and improve my spine health. Nothing really worked, but what I did find was some other things started to improve the longer I was on the carnivore diet, and that's quite helpful to me. You know, some of all these health issues, you kind of notice like your day-to-day feel starts to improve a bit. Now, what happened in December 2022, so last year, about 8 months ago, I had spinal fusion, decompression, laminectomy, discectomy, the whole lot, basically done on my lower back. And what was actually quite astonishing was I was able to still do activity in record time. So 8 days after my spinal fusion, I was able to actually exercise. And I wasn't doing heavy weightlifting. People always tried to demonize me and say, you're an idiot, this and it. But, you know, if anyone's actually seen me in the gym, they recognize that I train extremely well with perfect technique. So what I was doing was effectively some calisthenics, some bodyweight stuff, using a Zimmer frame. So I was just doing what I can to stimulate blood flow and just try and retain some strength. You know, the last thing you want to do is, if you've been a bodybuilder for the past 15 years, is to not do anything. That's probably the worst thing you could do. So yeah, record sort of recovery in that time. I started up my YouTube channel related to the carnivore diet. I needed a outlet for a few reasons. So I wanted to sort of generate more income, start my own business a bit better. I didn't have a platform to market myself. And I realized in the carnivore community, although there is lots of information, there's lots of people out there with really good, positive, thoughtful ideas and just helpful stuff. You know, you can watch a video from any of the top guys and think, oh, that's useful, but there's a niche that no one has yet fulfilled, at least not to the degree that I have yet. So I thought, okay, there's lots of people out there trying to like lose fat, you know. There's people that have gone past the autoimmunity, they're just looking to rebuild the body a bit. So I'm kind of that point at the end of the funnel, you might say. So people consult with me and talk to me about that sort of thing. So that's kind of where I'm at now. Yeah, I'm just glad to be connected to people like yourself, Bob.
Thank you for all of that. That's an excellent introduction. So now that you're on carnivore, can you go ahead and walk us through what an average day of eating looks like for you?
Sure, yeah. So what I've noticed about myself is I don't eat nearly as much as meat as what most people do on the carnivore diet. I seem to have a very mixed dietary intake. Part of me thinks that that's because I've had, you know, a spinal fusion surgery. My need for certain nutrients has gone up a bit. You know, your body gives you different signals. So immediately after surgery, I was eating like 10 jumbo-sized eggs every day. And that was routine, along with like mackerel, fatty fish, salmon, stuff like that. So I needed all the cofactors, all those sort of, you know, like omega-3, cholesterol, all the sort of stuff you find in those sort of foods. Now, as time's gone on, I've sort of reduced that a bit. I might eat 4 eggs a day, sometimes 5, sometimes 6. So where I'm at right now with my current diet is 3 or 4 eggs in the morning. I usually have some raw cheese of some kind, whether that be a cheddar, parmesan, or like a continental European cheese. Sometimes I have like some raw milk or some heavy cream, and I have that with some whey protein powder. Next meal, I have 3 meals a day, so the meal 2, usually beef or salmon or something like that. It might be a meal again with whey protein with some raw milk. I'll add loads of butter to it. Then last meal is usually the same as meal 2 or very similar. One thing I do every night before I actually have food that given day is I make what I call a carnivore protein butter bite. So that's just a very simple recipe where I melt down about maybe just over 1/4 pound of butter. Then what I do is add in some heavy cream to that. Then I add in a whey protein to that. So it's like a palatable, or hyper palatable, should I say, protein bite that you can just eat. So it gives you lots of nutrition, lots of energy. And I think that's particularly useful for people like myself that have a high energy expenditure, people that are athletes perhaps. I think that people that perform a lot of activity might struggle to stay on a carnivore diet without adding things like that in. So you're going to be slavering on butter, drinking heavy cream from the bottle sort of thing. But yeah, that's pretty much my diet right now, and it seems to serve me quite well, I think.
One quick note on a personal level. I was digging through all of your past videos. When did you decide that the no hair look was better than the hair that you used to have?
I think I came across you, Bob, and I had made my decision at that point. Yeah, I suffer with hair loss. it's something that's happened more and more over the years, and I just thought it's so irritating now. And I mean, I'm quite a simple guy. I like to put my mind towards little different things. I'm not very superficial. I don't worry too much about appearance, but I felt like the time I was spending each day to like prepare myself in a way got a bit frustrating. You know, I can just I shave my hair and I can just walk out the door right now and no one would know any different. You know, whether I washed that day or if I showered or did whatever. So yeah, a bit easier.
Thank you for that. That's sort of what I expected you to say, but I'm nice to get that confirmation. Do you mind talking about, because you mentioned that you had got diagnosed with autism? Do you mind talking just a few moments about how the carnivore diet has helped you with that?
Sure, yeah. So that was something which I think was the most noticeable thing that improved. It's like my overall cognition, like my day-to-day feeling. So my symptomology of autism is displayed as predominantly sensory things. So that means I don't respond well to heat, loud sounds, too much inappropriate light. So imagine you walking through a supermarket, and you've got this bright lights on you in those big warehouse supermarkets. That makes me feel drained, and it really affects my mood for that day. So I try to avoid things like that. But saying that, I think the diet has had an added like bonus kind of effect. So I'd say, I mean, you can't really measure it, but my inflammation in my brain seems much lower, judging by like symptoms and subjective feels. I know like there's research on a ketogenic diet, so high fat, basically where your brain just works better. And I notice that I'm more cognitively aligned with what I want to be able to achieve in a given day. So, for example, right now, I can talk to you, Bob, or I can talk to anyone else online, and I wouldn't have as much issue. Before this interview, I didn't have any kind of anxiety or worry. Now, I did have some technical issues, and that kind of gave me a bit of worry, but we're here now, so that's kind of got past that point. But I'd say for the most part, I'd highly recommend anyone to just go on it. Just even if it's not the carnivore diet, just go on a ketogenic diet, and you'll see a lot of benefit. There's a few mechanisms at play. So some of the more obvious ones are getting rid of all the plant toxins. So for people with autism, they're often noticing a benefit from being gluten-free, perhaps reducing the casein in the diet, and also oxalates from the diet. So they're three things which, for most people, probably give them an issue. Now, there are some people that are a bit different. I seem to be particularly sensitive to oxalate, fibre, and just any high sugar, high carbohydrate food. So anything which kind of inflames the brain, inflames the gut. And I think the diet for me is particularly useful. Not only people that can come off the diet completely for a week and come back on it and not have any issues. I'm not one of those people. I'd say I'm strict 99% of the time. And the time that I'm not strict is a choice. You know, it's not I've gone off the rails and just got fed up and thought, oh, you know, sod it, I'm gonna have I don't know, whatever people have nowadays. It's for me, it's a decision I actively make. So it means I'm out with family. There's nothing on the menu and I'm pretty hungry. I'm gonna have something I like, but I'll just try and choose something a bit more mindful. Something that I think is more appropriate for me. So something which is lower in toxins, perhaps.
Okay, now let's move on into some of the stuff that I think is going to be very interesting to my audience. As you know, most of my audience is the 50 plus crowd, with a significant portion of them being 60 and 70 years old. And you are the composition consultant. Could you just take a few minutes and give us some of your basic ideas for exercises that my generation can do? Not so much to get, the big bulky He-Man muscles, but just to hold off sarcopenia so that we can remain active into our elder years of 80, 90, and maybe even 100.
Yeah, I can appreciate that a lot. It's a very sensible question. You know, it's applicable to a lot of people. I think any time you're trying to undertake an exercise program, take it very slow to begin with. I know a lot of people, I've noticed personally, it's mostly women. They tend to be daunted at the idea of going to the gym and doing lots of activity. I understand that, especially if you're a female, all the guys will look at you and that sort of thing. And some people, they might be very overweight and they'll be scared to go to the gym. But I think you can do stuff at home. You don't need all this fancy equipment. I mean, I retain my muscle mass after surgery for a good period of time without having to add in extra stuff, you know. So I was just using maybe resistance bands and just, you know, objects around the house. I think you can get a lot of benefit out of maybe even 10 to 20 minutes per week, and that's total. So that's a single session, or you can split it up to 2 sessions. So you might do a upper or a lower body session. So you might do that Monday and Thursday. Or you might just do it all in one day. You know, I'd probably suggest to most people to split it up a little bit, just because, you know, the idea is to do the minimum effective dose. So do what you need to do to retain muscle, build strength, improve your body composition, and just hold off sarcopenia and things like that. So the way you might do that in a sample program might be perhaps a lower body exercise day. So you might just do some bodyweight squats. You might then do maybe a minute after that go into a wall sit. So that's just basically where you put your back against the wall and just bend your knees, just stay in that position for as long as you can. If you have particularly sore knees, there are things you can do. So you can push through your heels more, so that allow your weight distribution to go further through your glutes and hamstrings rather than your quads. I'm trying to think what else now. There's Bulgarian split squats. So even if you do that with the half range of motion that people commonly do, you can still effectively work each leg in isolation. So that'd be good for a bit of stability. Work all the secondary muscle groups that people tend to have issues with, like the abductor on the outside of the hip and the adductor on the inside of the groin. So you might just do those 3 exercises. You might just do 3 sets, you know, 3 total exercises. It might take you 5 minutes, maybe a bit longer. As you get more advanced, you can add a weight to your back, so you can put a rucksack on with a weight in it. You can hold onto a dumbbell, a kettlebell. You can add a resistance band, find a way to increase that intensity. The next is probably the upper body session. So push-ups. I know a lot of people out there are quite scared of push-ups, you know. But it's pretty safe exercise. I mean, even if you fall flat on your chest, it's not the biggest deal. And you can put a cushion in front of your pillow as well. So yeah, you might just do maybe a set of push-ups. Be careful with your grip, like how wide you put your hands. What you'll notice is if you put your hands too narrow, your triceps and shoulders might start to hurt, so your elbows might start to hurt. I think the best kind of stance and grips for most exercises is somewhere in the middle, so somewhere which feels natural. You feel pretty strong, you're not off balance, something like that. Another exercise might be to do a dip. So you might actually sit at the end of your sofa, then just put your hands behind you, you know, behind your back, then just dip up and down. So there's usually some videos on YouTube that you guys can watch. It's quite hard to demonstrate in an interview, but you can get the picture. Then if all that's too difficult, there are ways to sort of change your foot placement, your knee placement, your grip, the width of your hands, to make it a bit easier. Another thing, you can do what's called, I don't really know what the word is, but the name is, it's like a pullover. So you've got a bench in front of you, or a table, a chair, or maybe your kitchen worktop. All you do is put your elbows on it. So imagine your elbows are just flat against the top of the surface. And you just imagine you're pulling down. So imagine your back muscles are all firing up. So imagine you're trying to do a pull-up, but you're just taking the resistance out of your hands. So there's 3 exercises for lower body, 3 exercises for upper body. And that will, for the most part, be useful for most people. It will help you build some strength. There's a few more like added on sort of things you can do, but that's quite specific based on what you're trying to achieve. I emphasize that people should work in their active range of motion. So you shouldn't be bouncing up and down. You should go to the point where, for example, in a squat or a push-up, where you can go right to the bottom, but wherever it is right to the bottom for you will be individual. So you might not be able to, you know, go right to the floor or bend your knees fully in a squat position, but that's fine. You know, the idea is to put tension through your muscles. You may find over time your flexibility, your mobility may improve. So bodybuilding does actually improve your mobility, provided you do it correctly. Some common mistakes I might outline. So people tend to rush movements. People tend to go up and down too fast. I think there's no benefit to that unless you're training for a specific sport where that's required. Another thing as well is I think people tend to lock out movements a bit too much. In a lot of cases, when you lock out a movement, so for example in a push-up, if you just hold it there, that will just put strain through your wrists, elbows and shoulders, but it will take the tension away from your muscles. Now, you don't really want to be doing that too often because it can cause some issues with your joints. So you kind of have to fine tune it to yourself based on what you want to do. So it's very hard to prescribe something, but there's really basic principles. What I might suggest to some people, if they're just the average gym goer or someone looking to start a home workout, perhaps do maybe 45 to 120 seconds of time and attention. So if you could do a push-up, you can start at maybe one push-up. That might take 10 seconds. Just try and get to that zone where you're between 45 and 120 seconds. And that same sort of guideline applies to most people, I think. So you'll find somewhere between that bracket, you'll get the benefit in terms of building muscle, losing excess fat, building strength, fitness, all that sort of thing.
Okay. And now I get into a slightly more specific question, because you mentioned that you don't have to have a gym to start. You can just do body weight exercises. And I will just use me as an example here to perhaps give other people a guide to go by. I am at the point where I can do about 15 push-ups, going about 8 to 10 seconds per push-up. So I'm going fairly slow. At what point should I consider adding some weight into it? Where do I stop using just body weight, and when should I actually think about adding some weight?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there obviously becomes a point with diminishing returns. I mean, you can still do 15 push-ups with 8 seconds for each rep. You can still do 16 and 17. I think rep numbers are useful, but I mean, it's just a bit easy sometimes to time it. Just make sure your pattern of movements, your cadence, your up and down, your lifting and lowering is quite even. That's probably the safest way to do it. Now, what I might suggest is once you get somewhere around that maybe 90 to 120 seconds mark, so a minute and a half to 2 minutes, somewhere around there when that's your total time to tension or time under load, you might then add some resistance. Another thing you might be able to do as well is do what you call an isometric contraction or a static rep. So an example of a push-up, you might just go halfway up, so you're not locking out the elbows at all. But you might just hold that on, say, the 15th rep for as long as possible. That will give you lots of tension. The chances are, if you've already done 15, 16 reps, you're not going to be holding that for a long time. So, it's the hardest part of the movement.
What you're saying is basically once our time under tension is going beyond, say, 2 minutes, that we should consider either making the exercise harder by adding weight or maybe incline or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a safe bet. Again, it's not like you go past that 2 minutes and you won't build muscle anymore. So I'm not telling people, once you hit 2 minutes, that's it. It's just people want a guideline, and that's probably the most accurate bracket I think you give most people, which gives the best bang for your buck in terms of safety, building muscle, building strength, and fitness overall.
Okay, well, thank you, Jonathan. We have come to the point in the interview where I just open the floor up to you. Whatever it is that you would like to say to my audience, take as much time as you need, and just speak to my audience about anything you'd like to speak to them about.
Sure, yeah. I think that people come to the carnivore diet because they've suffered a lot, and they kind of need that information. So you'll see on lots of different videos and people that post online, there's lots of questions. I think what the best thing to do in most cases is go to the people that have a similar situation to you or have kind of experienced that. So you might go to Dr. Chafee to ask him about exercise performance relating to rugby. You might go to Dr. Berry to ask about specific health markers. You might go to Bart Kay to ask about exercise physiology, disease states, pathophysiology, things like that. You might go to Pim Johnson to ask about carb addiction. Trying to think who else now. For the bodybuilding side of things, you got, building muscle, losing fat. You got myself. You got Colt Milton. You've got Mark Ennis. You've got Bronson Dant. You've got Casey Ruff. You've got, I don't want to forget anyone now. I think I've got to that point where I'm going to hit a dead lane now. But yeah, you get the picture. So you try and meet with people online or speak to people that kind of have a similar experience to you. So that's the first and most obvious thing I think is useful. outside of that, although people do have experience, a lot of it is speculation. And I think people sometimes need a bit of motivation. I mean, if someone's, gone under some sort of spine surgery, I'm going to be pretty motivating to talk to about that sort of thing. Now other people will have a different view on it, so you might speak to a spine surgeon that's on the carnivore diet. They might also be useful. As some other sort of key considerations, I think there's quite a lot of zealotry and like dogma about the carnivore diet, like the idea we have to be perfect. And I believe that message is true and useful for a lot of people. Like if we set the standards so high, even if people meet it by maybe 80 or 90%, that's still a benefit. That's still a net plus. It's better than what they're doing beforehand with, Western diet. But I think sometimes you have to kind of ease in and out of it based on what you feel you can achieve at that time. I don't believe that getting yourself stuck in a rut and being anxious about your decisions when you're going about your day, trying to choose what foods to eat, is helpful. As much as we want to be strict and that sort of thing, and just eat meat, fat, and water, salt, whatever, I don't see many people that are strict in the carnivore diet. I was speaking to my friend Jerome Armstrong the other day, and on a personal level, so out of everyone I've spoken to online on the carnivore diet that I've seen, I'd say maybe less than 5 of them are strict, as in they just eat meat, fat, and salt and water. Now I don't think that's achievable for a lot of people. Some people like, I mean, dairy is a carnivore food, but some people think it isn't. But for the sake of argument, let's just assume it wasn't for some reason. Some people think, oh, dairy is going to break the bank, and I don't think it is. For a lot of people, maybe 25% of the global population need dairy. They have a requirement for more calcium. There's a genetic polymorphism at play, which means that they feel better and they thrive with more calcium in their diet. Now, you could meet that through, grounding up bones and things and having some broths maybe, but it's about what's easier and what's more appropriate and feasible for you, I think. Some other things as well. I mean, it is nice now that there's lots of people online like yourself, Bob, that advocate for the carnivore diet, and they make it very approachable. I think it's important that you have lots of different sources of information. So don't just come to me to ask me about body composition and fat loss. And, I might have a different experience to someone else. I might not have all the knowledge necessary for you to get from point A to point B. There might be someone better versed in that subject. And sometimes it might surprise you who it is. I mean, I've been collaborating with people recently online that have much more expertise than I do at certain topics. Like Nicole from Former Fat Girl. She knows a lot about emotional eating and that sort of thing. And funny enough, although I have overcome that kind of issue myself, I've noticed that kind of understanding it on a personal level and working with clients is something I'm quite new to. So for that reason, I approach people with that experience. So I think, based on like what I've said, I mean, the summary is, find people that kind of align with you. Find your maybe your tribe sort of thing. Don't worry too much about being perfect, but just strive to do what you can do and what's achievable. That's probably my main points I'd like people to take from this, I think.
I know you have a YouTube channel, The Composition Consultant, and I can see above your head there that you have the compositionconsultant.com. I'm assuming that's your website, but go ahead and tell us all about the things and the places we can find you and what types of things you're doing if somebody wants to reach out to you.
Sure, yeah. So, like you said, I'm the composition consultant, and that's my brand, I guess. So I try to work with people that have issues with the diet or training and they want to improve. So I'm very much a teacher. I give people the information they need. Although I do give people a direct program, a plan, something to go by, I teach them along the way. And kind of what I think now is you should never really retain a client for a long period of time. You should retain them for enough time for them to understand what it is you're giving them, what the plan is, how it works, how to make adjustments themselves. And I think that sometimes people kind of have issues with that. They just follow the plan, but it doesn't give them the information. It doesn't make them a better version of themselves, so they can't apply that on their own back, off their own back, to outline where you can find me, I mean, I've got Instagram, which is composition_consultant. I'm on quite a few Facebook groups, I think, so I post on there quite a bit. My website is compositionconsultant.com. I offer consultations, diet and training plans, and coaching. They're all extremely affordable, and I can say, as of right now, probably by the time this interview airs, they are the most affordable online. So I charge an amount that I believe is fair, and that helps me reach a lot of people that need the help that they're asking for. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Well, thank you, everybody. Don't forget, get down in the comments and thank Jonathan for his time today, because everybody's time is important. But thank you for being here today, Jonathan. I really appreciate the information. Don't forget, get out there. Be 1% better today, folks. Today, tomorrow, every day. Have a great day, folks. We'll see you in the next one.